Hi, my name is Martin Langmaid. In this session, I'm going to give you a quick overview of our VPN technology, PepVPN. PepVPN is the VPN engine used by SpeedFusion, our WAN bonding technology. It is a device-to-device VPN protocol, and it's really easy to configure. It provides 256-bit AES encryption as standard, and is naturally 100% compatible with SpeedFusion. We'll be adding PepVPN to all of our devices that support a single active WAN connection. Let's see how and where we can use PepVPN. Here is a possible deployment scenario where we have a balanced 380 in our London office that has two active WAN connections to the internet. Not only are the two WAN connections providing load balanced access to the internet, but because the 380 supports SpeedFusion, it can also act as a bonded VPN endpoint. In our small New York office, we have a PepWave BR1 with a single active WAN connection to the internet. By the way, the BR1 is also providing failover to 3G and 4G at this location too. Because PepVPN is 100% compatible with SpeedFusion, we can create a single logical VPN tunnel between New York and London that uses all available WAN links. So the VPN tunnel between these devices is taking advantage of the higher availability and increased bandwidth across both WAN connections on the balanced 380 in London. Let's take a look at how we set this up. Here is the web management interface of the balanced 380 in London. As you can see, we have two active WAN connections, and these are both showing as connected. Remember, the 380 is a SpeedFusion enabled device. So let's jump to the SpeedFusion configuration section and set up the site-to-site VPN profile. As you can see, there are no VPN profiles configured yet, and in a moment we'll add a new one. But before we do, I just wanted to point out this section below entitled Local ID. We use the local ID to identify the remote devices that we're connecting to over VPN. So when we configure the PepVPN on the BR1 in a moment, we'll need to know this value. Let's go ahead and configure the SpeedFusion VPN first. First of all, we need to give this profile a name. So let's call it something sensible, like New York Office. And we want it to be active. We want the encryption to be 256-bit AES. And underneath here, we need to put in the remote ID. So on the last page, we just saw that this device's ID is London, and I happen to know that the BR1's local ID is New York. So I'll type that in there. We've got an option here to put in a pre-shared key. This is for an additional layer of security. For the demo purposes, I'm not going to bother putting a key in here, but if we do recommend that in a production environment, use a nice long pre-shared key. And that's the same would be entered in the same way on this device as the remote BR1. And then underneath, we've got the field for remote IP addresses or host names. Now notice this field is optional, and that's because the way SpeedFusion and PepVPN initiation works is that the device with the external IP of the remote peer in its profile will be the device that initiates the SpeedFusion VPN. So in this case, I want the New York office to initialize the VPN into the London office, and as such, I don't need to put an external IP in here at all. Underneath that, we've got the data port. By default, this is port 4500, but you can change it to a custom port if you wish. Perhaps if you have an issue with port 4500, you want to change it because of local firewall configurations or something like that. For this demo, I'll leave it as default. Underneath, we've got WAN connection priority. This is where we prioritize which WAN ports are used for this SpeedFusion profile. Now, on this 380 at the moment, we've only got two WANs connected, WAN 1 and WAN 2, but I'm going to leave all of these WAN connections, including the mobile internet one, which is for the USB 3G or 4G dongle you can add to a 380. I'm going to leave them all at priority 1, because if I were to add an additional DSL connection to the device, or indeed plug in a 3G or 4G dongle later, those WAN connections will be automatically included into this SpeedFusion profile. It's pretty cool. So I can hit save, and then I'm going to click apply, And that's the site-to-site VPN configuration completed on the 380. You'll notice now on the front dashboard here, under SpeedFusion, we've got New York office, and it says starting. Indeed, it's trying to start, but it's, in this case, we're waiting for an inbound connection from New York, which we'll configure next. So this is the web management interface for the PepWave BR1. As you can see, we've got WAN 1, which is our active connected WAN here. And as we mentioned earlier, underneath we've got a cellular connection. At the moment it's a 3G connection, and that's in standby mode. So if WAN 1 were to fail, then the cellular connection would take over. You'll remember that the BR1 is a PepVPN device. So let's jump into those settings and see how we can configure that. Advanced, PepVPN. You'll immediately notice that it's pretty much exactly the same as the SpeedFusion VPN configuration on the 380. Once again, we've got a local ID here, and that's New York, and you'll remember that we just typed that into the remote ID on the VPN configuration on the 380. And we've got no existing PepVPN profiles configured. So let's create a new one. We'll give it a sensible name. London office seems to make sense. Once again, it's active, 256-bit AES. We're going to enter the remote ID, which you'll remember is London. And now, in this case, this is the end where we need to put in the external IP, and that's because the BR1 is going to initiate the connection with the London-based Balance 380. So let's just remind ourselves what this looks like from a network design perspective. Here we have the London office, and we've got two WAN ports, WAN 1 and WAN 2, with those external IP addresses. So if we want this BR1 to connect, we need to pop in one of the external IP addresses of that box. Now in production, we'd certainly go ahead and put in the second WAN IP as well. But in this demo, I want to show you what happens if we just use a single WAN IP. And I'm only putting in a single WAN IP here as I want to demonstrate the way SpeedFusion advertises all of the available WAN ports to PepVPN. Underneath we've got data port, and we're going to keep that as default as well. So click save and apply. We're back to the BR1 dashboard now. We can see a little scrolly wheel at the bottom here that tells us that the BR1 is currently applying changes. Under the PepVPN section, we can now see that we have a London office entry. Changes have been applied. So the PepVPN engine is now initializing, pulling all of those settings together that we've just added. And once it's initialized, it will then look to start or to create the tunnel, which it's doing now. So at this point, the BR1 is connecting or has connected to the London 380. It's authenticated. They've created the tunnel, and it's now updating its routes. And now we can see that we have an established, and the green padlock means it's secured with 256-bit encryption. And we've now got a tunnel between the BR1 and the London 380. And if we jump back and look at the dashboard now of the 380, we can also see that we've got an established connection there too. Back to the BR1, you'll notice there's a status button here next to PepVPN. We're going to click on that, and that shows us the current status of that particular profile. And we can see that there's a remote network in here, 192.168.1.0. And if we click this little arrow next to where it says London office, it will show us which WAN connection is currently being used for SpeedFusion. Now let's jump back to the 380, and we're going to look at the status of the New York office VPN on the 380. And I'm going to click the drop down arrow here, and you'll notice that the SpeedFusion VPN is currently running across both of the WAN links. Now this is quite important because you remember that on the BR1 configuration we put in a single external IP, and that external IP was WAN1. So what's happened here is when PepVPN has connected to the SpeedFusion VPN and initialized the tunnel, SpeedFusion has advertised all of the available WAN links to PepVPN, and PepVPN has created multiple VPN tunnels between its single WAN link and all of the available WAN links on the 380. And we're now aggregating traffic between the BR1 on its single WAN link to the 380 on its dual WAN links. And there we have it. That's how easy it is to set up a site-to-site VPN connection using PepVPN. I hope you found this video useful. You can find more information on PepVPN, SpeedFusion WAN bonding, and all of our products at our website, which is www.peplink.com. Thank you for your time.